Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About Houses. I'm Todd.
I'm Oana.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the war between Russia and Ukraine and how it is going to affect the real estate market in the U.S. Before we get started, though, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. We do have other videos coming that you'll want to watch. We have a national rent report. We have a market update coming. We just did a foreclosure video on what's going on in the foreclosure market. We're tracking all this, and if you want to stay in touch and understand what's going on and see more videos like this, you're going to have to subscribe. Okay, so let's start with the question is that, you know, there's a war in the Ukraine. Russia has invaded. Is that going to harm the real estate market? So let's start with what things are being affected because of the war right now.
So in the short term, we're going to see a change. We're going to see prices with energy being affected. We're going to see some durable goods being affected.
Okay.
We're going to see gold and other precious metal being affected.
Okay.
And I think what you're going to see is in real estate, you're going to see people hunker down.
Okay, so let's talk about that first. People hunkering down. That's an emotional reaction.
It is.
That's not really, there's uncertainty and they're just going to not do things.
Right.
And that may be not selling their house, not moving.
Right. So
Okay.
when there's uncertainty, when bad things happen, people tend to hunker down. And of course, we all hunker down at home, right? So maybe people that were thinking of selling their home now are going to say, you know what, I'm going to stay put where I am and I'm going to see how this whole thing shakes out, and then I'll reconsider. We already have an issue with not enough sellers turning properties, which is the reason for our current lack of inventory. So now you're going to see, I think, even more of a belt tightening of the inventory, where you're going to have even less sellers on the market.
Okay.
And then you're going to have even more buyers on the market, because what's been happening is with all the uncertainty, the stock market hasn't done that well. People who don't own homes want to own a tangible asset like a home.
Okay.
People who maybe are looking at the stock market and saying, maybe that's not where I want to have my money. They want to take some of that money out and again put it in a tangible asset like a house.
So we have the esoteric things, we'll call them. People are emotionally reacting. They're moving to safe assets, which is real estate and potentially precious metals. Okay, let's talk about actual things. Energy. That Russia's a big oil producer. So is Ukraine. You also have supply chain potential issues, and you also have the fact that there's actually workers in the Ukraine that work for U.S. companies. They're English speakers. They're technical workers, and that's going to potentially have an effect. So let's talk about those first.
Okay, so
energy.
So energy-wise, I think people don't always realize that a lot of the products in our lives have a petroleum component. So we're not just talking about the energy that it takes to manufacture them, but they have a petroleum component, right? Transportation. But so you don't think of it that way. But some flooring has petroleum components. Even some pharmaceuticals have petroleum components. So it's crazy how much petroleum there is in the products around us. So when you have that disruption, either because there's an issue with Russia putting out oil, and Russia, to kind of give you a perspective, I've heard politicians call Russia a gas station attached to a country,
right.
Because it is such a heavy oil producer. And then you've got natural gas too, and all of that generally tends to go to Europe. If there's any disruption, then Europe will have to source those from other places.
Okay.
And there's only so much of that, and so that causes changes in pricing. As far as the people in Ukraine, now the people in Ukraine, so my heart goes out to them. So let me start there. My heart goes out to them. Nobody wants to be in the middle of a war. All of us just want to do our jobs, take care of our families, and live our lives. So I feel my heart goes out to them. What's happening is Ukraine has a very highly educated workforce. A lot of them speak English. A lot of them work for U.S. companies or other global companies.
A ton of friends of ours that own companies, their tech teams are there in Ukraine.
Right. So maybe there are people who work for Google, maybe there are people who work for Apple, maybe there are people who work for Verizon, maybe there are people who work for all kinds of companies that you just don't associate with that. Maybe they work for Boeing, for all kinds of different companies. So that causes a disruption in other companies here in the US and globally.
Okay. So that's potentially a negative. The oil's potentially a negative. The emotional part where people are hunkering down, though, is probably a positive for the real estate market because it's not going to make it more volatile, it'll potentially make it less volatile.
Well, I don't know. I don't know it's going to make it less volatile, because when you have shrinking inventory, when you already have such low inventory, I think.
But you're not going to get a rush of people selling.
No.
Okay.
No.
So let's talk about that too. The stock market's been down probably 12% in the last 2-3 months, and real estate market's up substantially.
Right.
Homes that we sold 3 months ago are now worth 30,000-40,000 more. And a home that sold 3 months ago, you could get 40,000 more in Vegas, the median home. So that's actually, people are already moving from stocks into real estate. How is this going to affect? We have short and long term. Short term inventory is the driving factor.
Right.
If you have a low inventory, prices aren't going to crash. And one of the reasons that caused us to do this video was I saw a couple tweets on Twitter where people said, oh, now that there's a war, maybe the housing market will crash and I'll be able to buy a home, but I can't buy a home right now because the market's super expensive. Long run, there could potentially be, not only in the US, but in a lot of other countries, this drastic change in housing, because people are literally driving out of the Ukraine. They're going to Poland, they're going to Moldova, they're going to keep going into Romania, they're going to move into Czech Republic, and they're going to end up in Germany, and they're going to end up getting visas, and they're going to come to the US. They're English speakers. Okay, they do speak Ukrainian, they speak Russian, because they're similar languages, but they also speak English. It's everybody's second or third language. They will probably want to come here, and if they do, we are not in a position to just build more housing.
Right. And again, it kind of goes back to that whole supply chain that we talked about a little bit earlier. We're not in a position to do that. You're going to see new home builders that are going to not put prices on homes until they've already started them and secured the materials. I think new home builders are going to be under tremendous pressure for durable goods like washer, dryer, refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, all that good stuff. And then other durable goods such as flooring, I think they're going to be under tremendous pressure because of what's happening and how all of this affects the supply chain. Okay.
Now here's the thing. There was a war in Syria. That was the most recent kind of war. That affected Europe. But it didn't really affect us because we didn't have a huge number of Syrians coming here. The Syrians tended to just go into Europe. They went into Germany and they went into France and they went through Eastern Europe. And it affected them there because, of course, they do have limitations with housing. But it didn't affect us that much. It didn't affect the real estate market at all. There was zero effect. Actually, the war in Syria had almost no effect on our economy. It was just something that was on the news. Right. And it was a political thing and people talked about it. This potentially can have a long-term effect because this not only in Europe, but in the US, because something like this happens over time. It just doesn't instantly happen. Like, you're not going to wake up tomorrow, like the stock market may be down, the crypto may be down, but you're not going to see the long-term effects of this for a long time. It'll be muted out over time. It's just not going to, 2 years from now, everything will change because of it.
Well, I think it's kind of hard to quantify how drastic of an effect this is going to have on Ukraine.
Oh, it's going to decimate them.
Because you're having this massive brain drain as these people who are educated, capable, and industrious are leaving Ukraine in order to safeguard their own safety and that of their families, and they're moving east. They're moving, they're moving west toward Moldova, Romania, Poland, Czech Republic. They're going to go down to Croatia, Montenegro, and just keep making their way out. And what happens is when people are displaced this way, if the conflict is short-lived, a lot of them will go back. But the longer the conflict persists, the less likely it is that people go back. And what happens is, at the end of the day, Ukraine is basically going to be left this husk, completely devoid of these educated, capable, industrial people. And that is such an unfortunate thing because it's always sad to see that happen to a country.
Look, Russia is, I think, 84th in the world in per capita GDP, which most people, if you ask, they would probably guess 10 or 12. And the reason is because Russia and all the countries, Belarus and countries like that, they got tired of the politics, and the politics were harming them, and the capable people all left. And actually, we have a ton of billionaires and super successful business people, some of whom are our friends who live here in Las Vegas, and they came from these countries, and they left in the 80s, they left in the 90s, then they were still leaving. They're getting out of there, and it's the talent has left. And if this lasts a long period of time, they aren't going back. Like they're going to get out of there. They may leave their parents may say, I'm staying, I'm old, I'm not leaving. But they're getting out and they're not going to go back. And they're going to take with them their talent, the businesses they would have started, they won't start there. It's going to decimate real estate there.
Yes.
But I think we're pretty insulated from, I don't think the housing market is going to crash from this. This is much different than, say, World War II, when we had actually after World War II, we had a housing shortage for a decade because the GIs all came back, they got married, they wanted to buy houses.
Right.
And we didn't have the capacity to build houses. We were building tanks and airplanes, and ships. So now that we had to switch to building houses, and and home prices rose, and there was a housing shortage for a long time. But this isn't the same thing because we're not at war. We don't have tons of troops leaving, and millions of troops leaving, coming back. Hopefully, we don't have a war. But the long-term effect is probably going to be not negative for our market, but it'll be really bad for. It'll be really bad for Ukraine and probably for Russia too, for their housing, their economy. Like almost nothing good is going to come of this from them. No,
and it's all very unfortunate. And like I said, we certainly feel for the people in Ukraine and for the people in the adjoining countries that now have an influx of people, because that's going to put a lot of pressure on their housing, on their healthcare, on their whole social structure. So this is something that is going to be a humanitarian event for multiple countries, not just Ukraine. And I think that's part of the reason why I think it's going to impact all of us globally, because we are all tied together at this point. It's not like it used to be where we were more compartmentalized. Everybody's economies are intertwined. We get the products that we purchase have maybe a country of origin, but maybe they've been through multiple other countries before they got to the end consumers. So we are all tied together.
Yeah, and another analogy is, imagine you're at a lake and somebody throws 3 large rocks in at different points of the lake, and then you're trying to figure out at a certain point of the lake how the waves are going to interconnect. And remember that the waves go out, but they go out differently based on where the rocks were thrown, and they could all meet at one point and create a high wave, or they could cancel each other out and make no wave, or they could, have a little negative wave. And what do you think about the potential of the U.S. opening up more visas to Ukrainian tech workers and saying, hey, we have a limit now, but we're going to add to some people because of, maybe you're getting some kind of diplomatic or some other type of immunity or refugee status. Okay, that could be the biggest one. They could say, hey, we're taking refugees.
Right.
They're going to come here.
Yes.
I mean, right, there's a huge waiting list of people from Eastern Europe trying to come in the U.S. And I know people that are tech workers that are trying to get over. And actually, a lot of these U.S. companies, like you said, that their tech workers are there, they'll come over here. And they don't have to live in San Francisco and get paid $150,000 a year because they're already working remote. They can go to Tulsa, they can go to Tennessee, they can go to places where the cost of living's much cheaper. They can be in the U.S., be safe, not have to worry about the Russians and their towns being blown up, and then they have a good quality job, and they're already English speakers.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch this wave come across Europe. Ireland has a good tech industry. I think they're going to attract a good number of people as well.
English.
And they speak English.
But with an Irish accent.
Yes. So you're going to see this migration west, and it'll be interesting to see how people settle. And I think it's going to depend on industry. I think it's going to depend on what other connections people have. So maybe if they have family or friends or close associates in places that they'll migrate there. So it'll be interesting to watch this happen. It'll probably take somewhere between 12 and 18 months for people to settle down who are not going back.
Right.
So the people who don't keep going west are more likely to go back. The people who keep going west, those people aren't going back.
And this is, So my prediction is if this lasts a long time, this just destroys the Ukraine. The talent talented people are going to leave, just like the talented people left, Serbia and Bosnia and Croatia and those countries, Macedonia, they all left and came to the U.S. and went to other European countries. And, in Romania, the same thing. A lot of the people just said, I'm going out, I'm leaving, I'm getting out of Romania. And Romania's had a hard time recovering post-communism as a country. All the post-communism countries have had a really hard time keeping up with the rest of the world. And I definitely foresee that, the only thing that could come out of this if Russia just backs out, says, hey, we've achieved our objective, we did what we wanted, and we're moving back out, or the UN puts pressure, the US puts pressure on them. Regarding real estate, though, I don't foresee this having a negative effect on our market. In the short term, doing nothing. Long term, it could be one of 20 things that affect our market strictly because of immigration.
Right. But I don't know that that's something that can be factored in at this point. Certainly not in the near term. Long term, obviously, there's a myriad of things that contribute to where the market will be in 10 years. But in the short term, I don't think that the influx of people is sufficient to warrant any sort of effect on our real estate market. The main effect on our real estate market is sellers wanting to stay put and buyers wanting to buy a house.
And then the employment rate is the lowest. Right now, it's the lowest it's been in decades. The unemployment rate there's almost everybody's fully employed. It's a robust labor market. Wages are rising. All of this leads to a good, healthy housing market. We do have a rent update coming out pretty soon. We also have a market update coming out pretty soon. We'll talk about the low inventory and how that affects the housing market. But like Oana said, if you look at the top 20 things that affect the U.S. real estate market, this thing going on in Ukraine is not in the top 20. No. There's far more things. Monetary policy affects the real estate market. The fact that Wall Street are buying, coming out, and these private equity is now flooding the real estate market. That's affecting the real estate market. We're no longer in this, thing where small things can drastically change prices. Actually, in the last 30 years, the last big the recession we had before the 2008 one was the .com and the 9/11. And that didn't affect real estate.
No.
Even though the stock market tanked and it was bad for airlines and bad for a lot of people were out of work, real estate did really good. The only thing that tanked real estate in the last 30 years was real estate. It was the last downturn in real estate, which was a crash, which was caused by the lending industry.
Right. People
being allowed to buy 5 houses with 125% equity and all the building that was going on. And then all of that, it was like a perfect storm that caused it to dump. And the outside factors right now tend to affect real estate, even though market interest rates have gone up a little bit. Now they're looking like they may not go up because now there's going to be some stimulus potentially.
Right. So, to Todd's point, there is so much real estate right now that is owned outright, free and clear without a mortgage. So
highest in history.
Right. So what caused the previous downturn in real estate was that real estate was over leveraged, so people owed more on the houses than they were worth. That's not the case right now. Right now, there are so many houses in the market as a percentage of the market. A large chunk of the market is owned free and clear, either by mom and pops who own their home free and clear, good for you, or by institutional investors that own these homes free and clear, so they're not leveraged. So because of that provides a lot of stability for the market, a lot of support for the prices. So again, you're not going to have the situation where homes are worth less than what is owed on them. Certainly not in mass.
Okay, so our bottom line here is that we do not believe that what's going on in Ukraine is going to negatively affect the real estate market. Short term, it's going to do nothing. Long term, there could be potential things because of supply chain, because of immigration and refugees, with more people here now looking for housing potentially as tenants, but that still affects the housing market. And what else?
So if you thought this video was interesting, if you want to hear more of our updates, hit the notification bell, like the video, share the video, and we'll see you on the next video.
Bye.